We're delighted to be welcoming the man behind Vauxhall's environmental strategy, and he also launched the Ampera electric car here in the UK. And he's also, let me get this right, the chairman of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders Electric Vehicle Committee. As such, I think there are a few people better qualified to talk to us about the future of urban transport. So please welcome Ian Allen.
Great, thanks very much, and good evening, everybody. How delighted I am to be following the comic poet in this evening setup tonight, which certainly wasn't in the script given to me by our PR department, and I will be talking to them a little bit later on. So, yeah, I am the manager for the environmental strategy for Vauxhall, but really what I've been focusing on for the last couple of years really is the launch of the Vauxhall Ampera, which is parked around the corner, and something with which we have tied in with a filling station and also the series of events running from now through to the end of the year here. It might be a bit of a strange situation for Vauxhall to be in for some of you, but I guess it's the electric vehicle side of it and the environmental side of it which gives us a bit of a chance to come to events like this to talk about the future, to talk about creativity, to talk about newness, because we're in a situation in the car industry at the moment where we've got to face up to some pretty big issues for the future going forward. And one of those issues I think Mike touched on in his presentation, and that was to do with congestion going forward. You know, we talk about these mega cities which are developing around the world. Something like 1 billion cars are going to be on the road by 2022. By 2030, the balance of power is going to shift from the more rural areas into the more urban areas. So by 2040, 80% of the world's wealth will be based in and around these mega cities which are growing up. And I guess just looking at that picture shows some of the issues that we're going to be facing with regard to the motor car. So like I say, we have a bit of an opportunity here to try and look at the motor car in a different way and how that's going to evolve in the future. And as far as we're concerned as Vauxhall and with our parent company GM, it's also looking into the different ways of travelling, the different ways of getting from A to B, especially in some of these urban areas, like around here in King's Cross, central London in particular. And to do that, we have to kind of have a relook at the whole blueprint of the car and say, well, okay, if that's the way that these cities are going to go in the future, then what does the car need to look like? And if we take a look at this blueprint of the car that we've been used to dealing with, if you like, over the last 100 years, it's trying to look at where it needs to evolve to in the next 100 years. So all the cars that we drive today, in the majority, are driven by oil. They're powered mechanically. It's something that we've been used to for over 100 years now. Those are the cars that we've been driving. We're used to going to petrol stations, filling them up and driving out and going away. And actually, we're quite used to doing that, and us as a manufacturer are quite used to building those cars and making components for them which drive the car mechanically and wear out and through wear and tear and that kind of stuff. But actually, we can't rely on the supply of fossil fuels forever and a day. So that's the kind of thing that also drives us to look at alternative methods of propulsion in the car industry, because various things, whether it be global warming through greenhouse gases or noxious emissions, whether it be the more expensive ways that we have to go to actually mine the stuff out of the ground, there is a limited supply of oil in the future. So we have to take a look at alternative methods of propelling us from a personal mobility standpoint. There are also standalone vehicles with total dependence on the driver. So actually, there's no communication necessarily going on except for a bit of Bluetooth and maybe a bit of waving from the window as we pass one of those service stations that Luke was talking about. And the driver has to be concentrating the whole time on the operation of the car. And obviously there's various consequences involved if you're not concentrating the whole time on what you're doing. And also, as Mike talked about, the cars that we're used to driving today aren't necessarily completely designed for moving from A to B, if you like. They're kind of designed with the age-old blueprint of 4 or 5 seats, 4 or 5 doors, maybe a hatchback and maybe a nice sporty 2-door coupe to drive every now and again. But it's not very often that we actually put 4 or 5 people in those cars that we drive. And if all we're concerned about is moving from A to B in a city, then potentially we need to look at how we change that going forward. So looking at alternative methods of propulsion, we've got electricity and hydrogen up there. Hydrogen, the most abundant element in the atmosphere. It's not just as easy, though, as kind of pulling it out the air and shoving it in a petrol tank. There's various things involved. But it can be a very green method of propelling the motor vehicle. There's zero tailpipe emissions on a hydrogen vehicle, but it does depend on how the hydrogen is produced in the first place. But it can be a very environmentally friendly fuel, as can electricity. And we're going to need electricity forever and a day. Whether that be to drive electric cars, we are always, always, always going to need electricity for the lights you see there and everything around us. And if we can always rely on a supply of electricity, then in theory, if we can develop cars to run electrically, then we've always got methods of moving around. They're connected, so potentially all these vehicles could be talking to each other. In-car entertainment and car-to-car vehicle communications are starting to happen now and will continue to develop in the future. And those are the kind of things that we're looking at, especially in terms of anti-collision devices, which talk to each other and make sure that every car doesn't crash into each other as it zooms along. I will, however, state that, of course, all cars need to have that anti-collision devices for it to work properly. And semi and full autonomous driving. So at the moment, we always have to be in control, which means that we're always concentrating on driving. And apart from using our mobile phone, eating a sandwich and having a drink, most of the time we have to have our hands on the wheel to concentrate on what we're doing at all times. But in the future, it could well be that the cars drive themselves, either on a full basis or on a semi-full basis. We're seeing stuff at the moment where cars are parking themselves. They're telling you when you're wandering out of your lane. They're also potentially telling you if the car in front is stopping or changing speed. So that kind of car-to-car communication is going on, if you like, on a passive basis at the moment rather than an active basis. And that will continue to go forward. And then vehicles tailored to a specific use. If all we're talking about is going from A to B, and all we want to do is move from A to B, then it's determined by how quickly we want to travel there, how cheaply we want to travel there, and how stylishly we want to travel there. And I guess we'll all have our own different opinions on where in that kind of three-sided triangle matrix we sit. But that's basically what we have to decide. In terms of GM, we've had various toys, if you like, with alternative propulsion starting back in the 1960s. That's actually a hydrogen van, which, to be honest, I'm not quite sure I would get in, really. And then the lunar module, still out there somewhere in the Arizona desert. It'd be quite interesting to see if it really did start again once anybody came to have a look. An electric vehicle even Opel were making in the 1990s. And then the EV1, a vehicle which was built over in America when the American government decided that all the major motor manufacturers in America had to have an electric vehicle in their range. And this was GM's attempt, allegedly the most aerodynamically vehicle ever built. There was 1,000 of them leased out to customers in California. Through whatever reason, lobbying most likely, the American government changed their opinion and said, actually, you don't need to make an electric vehicle anymore. So guess what? All the American manufacturers stopped. And I guess it will come out in time as to who the reason behind that was. Was it the government? Was it the oil companies? Was it the car companies themselves? And I guess only time will tell. But it's kind of synonymous that now we're kind of back in the situation now where we're back on the electric roadshow. But the good thing is it looks as though it's here to stay. And then, as I said before, we've got the various hydrogen vehicles that we're developing there. But the whole reason that I'm involved in this is because of this. And also Steve was talking about beauty. I think he was talking about the beauty of the motor car, although that was kind of interspersed with his sex talk. I guess if you look at the beauty of that car there, for us it's not just skin deep because it also marries up the technology which we've been using for 100 years in terms of an internal combustion engine, while still being a plug-in battery electric vehicle. And for us, it kind of solves the issue of range limitations of electric vehicles by using technology. And for us, again, this is great because this puts us in the situation where we're able to create. We're able to take things forward and try and put ourselves at the forefront of technology. But I'll end the marketing speak there. One thing you'll notice here, though, is the fact that we need to plug it in. And one of the challenges with regards to cities going forward is congestion and space and all that kind of stuff. And to put in charging equipment requires space. It requires stuff under the ground, and it requires stuff out of the ground, and cables and plugs and all that kind of stuff. But things like inductive charging, which we're also looking at the moment, are becoming a reality. And what's inductive charging? Well, rather than using cables and plugs, it uses plates which are in the ground and then transmit electricity through an electromagnetic field into the car itself without the need for cables and plugs and sockets and all that kind of palaver, really, which means that we can have spaces dedicated to electric vehicles without having to have posts there where vehicles can just come in, drive and park over that space, and Bob's your uncle. A couple of hours later, they'll be charged with electricity moving through that electromagnetic field, which still seems a little bit Star Trek to me. I'm no engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I am starting to understand some of that stuff, which really worries me greatly. And if you look at it from an over perspective, as long as we as manufacturers can come together as an industry, and I guess this is where my role as the chairman of the SMMT committee comes in, is that as long as we can all decide on the fact that we'll have the plate in the same place, that it will be the same place in the road, that no matter whether you're driving a Vauxhall or a Ford or a Renault or a Porsche or whatever, that as long as that plate's in the same place in the ground and the plate in the car to receive the electricity is in the same place, then we can all park there without having to worry about what kind of mobile phone charger we've got. So I guess that's the infrastructure side of things. And then from a connectivity side of things, we've kind of got this Mary Mungo and Midge image here, sorry, showing my age a little bit, which has got various communications going on, whether they be terrestrial, whether they be satellite communications, or whether they be car-to-car communications. And they'll all be allowing the cars to talk to each other to define the most efficient way to work, the cheapest way to work, the least congested way to work, and also to get to work in the safest manner possible through all the anti-collision stuff that's going on. It may even be that the electric vehicles can get onto a train in the similar way that you might move your car from Paris down to the south of France today, get charged up as you're moving along, and by the time you get to the south of France, you've got your electric vehicle with you. So you've travelled on an electric train, and you've still got your electric car, and you can still travel around electrically once you get to your destination. So again, that's the kind of stuff that potentially we need to work on, which marries up then this kind of public transport question with a personal mobility solution as well. So various things going on in this industry, which, as I say, is great to be involved in. And one of the cars that General Motors have got is this ENVI, electronic networked vehicle, which is one of those things that can actually talk to each other. They can send signals through the antenna, it can tell where it is through the GPS, and you can even set it to drive itself rather than actually driving the vehicle itself. And of course you can choose to do whichever of those things that you want to do. And this could be the kind of vehicle that we're using for urban mobility in the future to move, as I say, stylishly, cheaply, quickly from A to B. So I guess looking at some of the layout of the chart, which has seemed to change a little bit, some of the three things that we're looking at in terms of helping us with the reinventing NG personal mobility is design, electrification and connectivity. So ultra small vehicles, battery propulsion and wireless communications and car-to-car communications. But as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't necessarily have to be bland. So again, picking up on Stephen's presentation, there still can be beauty, whether it's electric, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's combustion engine going forward. And this kind of thing allows us to be in those places. It allows us to be creative and to be new. Okay. Thank you very much.